start by having you say and spell your complete name?
No. I go by H. Robert Krear, actually, Bob Krear, K-R-E-A-R.
And your middle name is?
Middle name is Robert. I don't use my first name.
Okay. And do you remember your service number?
Yes, I do. It was 13156387.
Wow, that's impressive. You can remember.
That's one you never forget.
Okay, and how about if you tell me what was the highest rank served in the 10th?
I became a staff sergeant, which was a platoon guide, actually. I was the second in command of the platoon in the non-commissioned ranks.
Okay.
For a short period of time, I was a platoon sergeant, but when our platoon sergeant was wounded.
Well, I'll tell you, we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to probably start with a little more, base things. Can you tell me a little bit about why you wanted to be in the 10th?
I was on the Penn State ski team, Penn State University ski team. I knew nothing about the 10th at that time, but toward the end of that academic year at Penn State, our ski coach told us about this mountain training unit that was being formed out in Colorado. Prior to that, I thought I was going into the aviation cadets. But as soon as I heard one could ski in the Army, why, I changed my mind immediately. As I think did members of many ski teams in most northern universities.
What was it about the 10th that appealed to you?
One could ski. If we had to fight on skis, that sounded great.
Do you recall the contents of your letters of recommendation?
No, only one. When my high school principal said, "I never heard this man utter a swear word." And that must have been that must have been quite a joke to the National Ski Patrol System, who was reviewing those letters of recommendation.
Do you think somebody gave you a recommendation about your athletic abilities?
Yeah, definitely, because I'd been a gymnast and a football player, and I was a very powerfully built young man.
Who would have given you a recommendation?
I think my high school coach, high school football coach.
So it was your high school coach and your principal
And I forget who the other one was.
Tell me one more time what your principal wrote in your letter of recommendation.
He said, "I've never heard this man utter a swear word."
Sure
That meant a lot to him.
That's funny. Can you talk a little bit about why you turned down the opportunity to be in OCS, or didn't gravitate towards positions of higher rank?
When I was inducted, which was at Fort Meade, Maryland, they sent me from there up to Fort Custer, Michigan, to the Military Police Replacement Training Center. I didn't want to go there, but they sent me there anyway. And there, in an interview with an officer, he offered me OCS. He also wanted to send me back to Penn State to study engineering. And I was just so determined to get to that mountain training center that I turned down both of those options. And I told him, as far as OCS was concerned, I felt I should serve as a non-commissioned officer for a while, but before I would feel that I was capable of being an officer. And he liked that. He complimented me on that. I've never regretted it. In the 10th, a lot of our men went to OCS, and they were never returned to the 10th Mountain Division. So we were very afraid of that, very, very skeptical of how the Army would treat those how they would honor their commitment to send us back. In many cases, they didn't.
Was it key to you to stay with the 10th?
Very much so, yes. Very much so.
And why
Yeah. Well, there were the mountains, there was the skiing, and most of all, there was the very high quality of the men. The large percentage of them were college athletes, and many of our officers were our former ski coaches, and it was just one terrific outfit. There never was one like it before, never will be one like it again, I don't think. Yeah.
And if you had gone to OCS?
I might have been sent off to some other division. If there had been a necessity for officers, replacements overseas, they wouldn't have had any choice, actually, but to send us over there.
Can you talk a little bit about how you felt about being in a leadership position during battle?
It's a hard thing to say. You do what's expected of you, and if they need a leader, you try to be a leader. You've never trained yourself in your life to be a leader, so it's kind of a strange situation to find yourself. But when the other men look up to you for leadership, well, you slip into that role, and you take it very seriously. And that's about all I can say about it.
Can you talk a little bit about your time at Hale during your training? When you think about your maneuver experiences, maybe it doesn't have to be limited to D series, but can you talk a little bit about how seriously you performed during the day, but then what was the overall mood in the evening?
Most of the time we were on maneuvers during the day. Then at the end of these maneuvers, wherever we were, we would stop and we'd get out our machetes and we'd chop branches off the trees. We'd make spruce bough beds, and then we'd eat, and then following that we'd build a big fire and just have a lot of relaxation and camaraderie around the bonfire.
In your combat history, I read with some amusement how latecomers to the bonfire. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, that was mostly at Camp Hale. When it was extremely cold and it got down to 20, 30, 40 degrees below zero, we would be forming a rather tight circle around that bonfire. And anybody else that wanted to get in, well, there just wasn't any room for them until they went out and gathered some wood and brought it in, threw it on the fire to expand the circle. And then they could fit in and get warm.
How cold was it?
I remember 40 degrees below zero, sleeping out in the snow in 40 degrees below zero. So cold that the trees nearby were splitting, a phenomenon known as frost checking. The only time in my life I've ever heard that. But
what's 40 below feel like?
I was inside of a double Arctic down bag, of course. I was chilly in there, no doubt about that. And I was warm enough that the 40 degrees didn't get to me. But although none of us got much rest that night, I'm sure. But
what do you do to prepare for severe cold mentally?
Well, by then we were mentally prepared for it. We'd gone through that several times. Nothing quite as cold as that, but in these double Arctic down bags, there's one down bag inside of another, so you can twist around in the inner bag so that your face is not exposed to the cold. You make sure that you have on warm socks, so your feet don't get cold. And you bring into your sleeping bags with you almost everything you don't want to freeze, including your ski boots and your canteen full of water. So that in the morning you have no problem dressing.
It's all right there.
It's all right there and warm enough.
Were you outside much?
We were, during the winters of Camp Hale, we were outside most of the time, I'd say, yes. I'd say that it was some of the most rigorous mountain training that any troops ever went through. And I'd say we came extremely physically fit, always carrying heavy packs and working operating either on snowshoes or skis, and our arms were built up very strong for the use of ski poles, and we were very fit.
Can you talk a little bit about the weight?
The weight of the packs, for instance?
Yeah.
Well, it was said that they weighed about 90 pounds with all the things we were supposed to carry in them. I remember one time, a night maneuver, I was carrying my 90-pound sack on top of a Trapper Nelson packboard, and on top of that packboard there was a ground machine gun. So I was carrying the machine gun and my pack. One of the men in my column gave out, so I took his 90-pound pack and slung it over the front of my chest. So I was carrying two 90-pound packs. Maybe they weren't quite that heavy, but two packs anyway, and the machine gun. So that must have been well over 120, 130 pounds.
How much did you weigh?
I was 185 pounds then, and 5'11". I've been a very powerful gymnast in college and football player. So I was strong, but I didn't carry that very long, of course. But
you must have been all muscle.
we all were. We all were, yes.
Thinking about how heavy your rucksacks were, can you talk a little bit about how that gave rise to what particular song that gave rise to?
Oh, a song called 90 Pounds of Rucksack, Pound of Rubber Too, something like that. That was a favorite song of the men in the tent.
And what's the origin of that song?
I don't know them all, frankly, anymore.
And how did that song come to be again? How did that song come to exist?
I don't know who was.
But I mean, can you talk a little bit about how it? Can you tell me about how heavy your packs were, and then how that gave rise to a certain song?
Ready?
Ready.
We had to carry an awful lot of things with us in the field. And all those things combined, and I can't enumerate them here, but sometimes amounted to almost 90 pounds. And someone in the tent, or some group in the tent, there were some in the 87th who were great singers, and I think it might have been them that originated this song called 90 Pounds of Rucksack, a Pound of Rubber Too, and goes on from there. But
Can you tell me a little bit about what happened to you at D Series?
D Series, some consider D Series the worst part of the training, but for those of us used to the out-of-doors, used to cold, used to winter, it was fun in a way. We were out most of the time. Sometimes we slept inside of our mountain tents, but we didn't like those mountain tents because they condensed a lot of moisture in the inside, so most of us would just sleep on top of the tents, using the ground cloth. And there would be times when we were sleeping right out in the open inside these double Arctic down bags. We'd wake up in the morning, we'd actually be covered with snow. It started to snow during the night, we didn't know what had happened. But inside the bags, you were toasty warm, of course. And the snow was a great insulator, too. The only problem was sometimes that would make the bags a little wet and they had to be dried out, or it wouldn't be too good for insulation anymore. But D Series was pretty rough. And that's when I think that we achieved our greatest physical fitness, fighting that snow all the time and climbing the mountains.
What was the hardest part about D Series?
Well, it was all hard. Hard, but at the same time, it was a pleasure because we knew we were achieving the type of training that we needed for combat. Just hard physical work most of the time. Pushing through the deep powder snow with skis or snowshoes. It builds up your legs and builds up your arms. I remember once I went on furlough after the late winter back home, and I went swimming My arms never tired due to all the activity I had from ski pulling.
How did your body feel during training?
Well, I was very physically fit before I went in the Army, so I didn't have any problems as far as physical training was concerned.
Could you talk a little bit about the Easter Sunday blizzard?
That was very interesting, yes. We were up on top of Shrine Pass, as I remember, and suddenly we got caught in this blizzard, and it got so bad that the orders came down that the maneuver was over. Just dig in, hit the sacks, we'll wait it out. So we did. We all got out our machetes and we built ourselves snow houses and cut limbs off trees for boughs for our beds. And actually, we dug right down into the snow. And something interesting happened that night because I think 4 or 5 other guys with me built this snow house, which was just about level with the top of the snow. So we were down under it, actually. And in the morning, when the regiment moved out, my platoon sergeant couldn't find me, or the men with me. We were completely snowed under. So I was really amazed when I burrowed out and found out the whole regiment was gone. But they left a broad track, of course. We were able to catch them pretty easily. But my platoon sergeant was kind of mad that he couldn't find me, but then he had never made any effort to find out where we were sleeping that night anyway. So we were both in the wrong there.
How many feet of snow fell?
Oh, it must have been at least 2 feet, something like that, on top of the other snow. He knew me pretty well, and he knew I was buried under snow somewhere nearby, and I'd come out and catch up.
What a surprise. Can you tell me a little bit about your favorite weekend activities at Hale?
A lot of the men went to Denver, to nearby towns, and Leadville and Aspen and so forth. But my favorite activity was fishing for trout. So I go to the mess hall and get some food and throw my sleeping bag in the pack and take off up some of those valleys to some of those trout lakes and fish for cutthroat trout. And I'd camp up there. And that was my favorite activity, I'd say.
Did you go by yourself or in a group?
Often by myself, but sometimes with a friend.
Did you have a sense of self-sufficiency? You didn't worry about being out there?
No, before I went, I was raised as a woodsman back in Pennsylvania, in the Appalachian Plateau country, so that was second nature to me.
Do you recall Stuart Abbott at all from your time at Camp Hale?
I just remember him as a very fine-looking guy, very friendly. We didn't get to know each other too well, but we were friends. That's about all I can say. But his loss was a tragedy.
Do you recall anything about how he was lost?
I can't know. I don't remember anymore where he was lost. It might have been on Belvedere, but I'm not sure. Mount Belvedere.
I know he was a real nature lover. Did you ever have a chance to observe that?
No, I didn't. And I wish I'd known, because I was too. Yeah.
Let me see. How about if you talk a little bit about when you got over to Italy and were in battle, when you had to fight, did you fight out of a sense of duty or more were you just mad?
You make a good point. I fought entirely out of a sense of duty. I was never mad. Even though I'd already lost my brother to the war, I found it very difficult to be mad. I don't think I was ever angry during the war, during combat. And I think most of us felt that way. It's a strange thing.
How did you feel when you were at Camp Hale and there was sort of a lack of an assignment in terms of getting the division into action?
We couldn't understand what was going on. As a division, we were overly trained. And we thought everybody would snap us up. The Norwegians wanted us badly in Norway. And we were really surprised when the General Eisenhower's staff turned us down. He didn't, but his staff did. And he learned afterwards about it, and He said he would have taken the 10th Mountain Division if he had been offered it, if he had known about it. But then we were saved from regular flatland combat by Major General George P. Hayes, who joined us down in Texas. And because of him, and because of General Mark Clark in Italy, who said he wanted us very badly, we went to Italy and fought as mountain troops instead of as flatland troops. And we're always very grateful to General Hayes and General Clark for that.
In what ways were mountain troops different than flatland troops?
We were adapted to high altitude to begin with. We were extremely physically fit, more so than most of flatland troops. That doesn't apply now to modern infantry, Marines and Rangers and that sort of thing. They're extremely physically fit. But then that was not the case. And we had an esprit de corps, I think, that most flatland troops don't have. We were all of one type of person. We all loved the outdoors, we all loved mountains, we all loved to ski. And we were just a little bit different that way.
When you got over to Italy, did you, and you were going on patrols, what was your feeling as you were going on these patrols, getting nearer and nearer to where the enemy was?
Well, needless to say, on these patrols, especially the early ones, we were very nervous, very nervous. I have to admit, probably a little bit scared. It's a psychological thing, and we were not totally prepared for it psychologically. But the thing is, once the firing starts, then you forget about that. Then you're at your best. And
can you talk a little bit about that patrol in January near Pianasinato? I can't say it either.
Pianasinato, yeah. Pianasinato, yeah. This was an interesting patrol. We started out in the snow, and because some of the men were replacements or never had ski training, well, we couldn't use skis. And apparently it was felt they couldn't use snowshoes either, so we just waded through the deep snow. We came to this, we were on this mountain ridge above the town of Pianasinato, and we were told to go down and clean out the town. Well, this was extremely naive. Anyway, we started wading down through the deep snow toward this town in the dark, creating a fairly deep deep trench in the snow as we went. We got down part way, there was a rifle shot off to our right, and those ahead of the column then just veered off to the left a bit. Then after a while, there was a shot off to the left. So we straightened out again a little bit to the right. What we didn't realize was we were being funneled into an ambush. And down near just about the time we reached the bottom of the valley, they opened fire on us, and we just automatically fell down in that deep trench that we had created. And that saved us. We just turned around in that trench, crawled back up the mountain. The Germans couldn't see us. Not a man was hit, whereas the whole patrol could have been captured. It's just a bit of luck. But from that experience, we all got our combat infantry medals.
When you were at Querciola, can you talk a little bit about how your time at Querciola hardened you off? Is there sort of a hardening process going on there?
We did some patrol action at Querciola, and the Germans also sent some patrols against us, and that's where we lost our first men, I believe. Well, not the first, but one of our outposts was hit one time by a German patrol, and I was in a squad up in Querciola. That was a reserve squad, so we were called in down to this outpost. I forget its name now, and it was Bear or something like that. But when we got to the outpost, which was a house, we were instructed by someone in the house to go out to occupy some foxholes out in front. Surprised me that they weren't already occupied, but anyway, we did that. I took the foxhole to the extreme left. A very good friend of mine, Art Argewitz, took the one to my left. Just as he was going out there, he was machine gunned and killed. And that was very hard for us to take because he was one of the best and most experienced men in the 10th Mountain Division. It turned out he was killed by one of our own men who was in the house and hadn't been told that we were going out there to occupy those foxholes. And so that was a hardening process, all right. We began to realize that we were in combat and that men were going to die. So if that's what's meant by hardening process, that's about it, yeah.
When you first got over to Italy, can you tell me a little bit about how you shared food with Italians?
Yes, they were pretty hard up for food because most of the food being produced in that part of Italy was being taken by the Germans and shipped back to, utilized by their troops and also shipped back to Germany. So then, outside our chow lines, of course, there were always lots of kids, sometimes parents waiting for any scraps that we had left over. Usually after we'd all been fed, if there's any food left over in our field kitchens, that was always turned over to these people also. Now they ate a lot of that, but they also saved a lot of that for their stock. They had chickens and pigs and things like that. And so, but they were in sore straits as far as food was concerned. But the U.S. Army wasn't letting anybody starve. They never did, never would. But
so. The U.S. Army went out of their way to create excess food for them?
I would think so. Yes, they did. Because Americans are pretty soft-hearted people.
Do you think that this has to do with part of the Italians' feelings of gratitude, or what do you think accounts for the Italians' feelings of gratitude toward the Americans?
Well, that was part of it. Of course, also we liberated these high mountain towns, and they were a very grateful people. And there have been many reunions in Italy since the war, and every time we see the overwhelming welcomes, very serious welcomes. And they really are grateful that we liberated them from the Germans. And the Germans had been very severe with them and very brutal. So. A lot of these people also had relatives in the States too.
Do you think that the way you shared not only your food but putting your lives on the line for the Italians, how do you think that affects what they shared with you?
Well, I don't know. When we went back on the reunions, those towns had been rebuilt, and most of them had become little ski resorts, and they were all pretty well off then. They had it to spare, but they didn't pull any punches. They fed us well, but they remembered that we had shared with them.
Can you talk about what was the reaction of the Italians, like in the Po Valley, once they knew they were going to be liberated?
Oh, they went crazy. Yeah, I remember when we entered Verona from the south and went through the city. We were entering from the south. The Germans were leaving from the north. And people couldn't believe it at first. Then they started pouring out of their houses and lining the streets. They grabbed every American soldier they could and embraced them. And very, very, almost out of control, you might say. But the Italian people are pretty much that way anyway, I guess. At least I assume.
They didn't have much, but what did they do with what they had?
They shared their sausages with us, their wine with us. And I remember once a man offered me a small glass, looked like a small glass of water, and I thought it was water, but it turned out to be grappa, one of their, something like our white lightning in this country, our moonshine. I downed it in one gulp, and my stomach hurt for an hour after that. I was pretty careful after that, what sort of liquor I accepted from them.
How were the Italians treated by the Germans?
Very brutally, very brutally. The Italians had organized their partisanis, which were like guerrilla fighters, of course. And So every time they caught them, why they would murder them in some way. But if the Italian people didn't cooperate completely, why they were punished. And the Germans were pretty brutal that way.
How do you think personal stories from individual soldiers different from the points of view from people in higher officers?
That's a good point. We all experience combat in a different way. And we non-commissioned officers and those under us experience war a little bit differently than our officers did. And the higher up the officers go, the less they see of actual combat. So, yet we who fought at the lowest level had a very poor perspective of what was going on. That there have been some good books written since the war that explained that perspective to us, but you know only what's going on around you, what you can see, and that's all you're supposed to know, I guess.
Did the enlisted men of the 10th know the overall tactics?
We were never taught tactics, no. And I think that was a mistake. Would have been, because in combat it's usually very often the case that the higher non-commissioned officers take over after the officers are killed. Yeah. So I think they should be taught some tactics.
When you think about John Winchester, tell me what you can about John Winchester.
Yeah, John was, I don't know how much Indian blood John had. Maybe he was pure Indian. He was pure soldier too. He's a great guy. We all liked Sergeant Winchester. He was very good in combat, as I understand. I never really had any experience with him there, but he liked the patrolling at night. He was very good at it, being an Indian. He was highly respected. He became a first sergeant, I believe, before the war was over. He was all soldier, very serious about what he did. I'd say he was one of the best soldiers in L Company, in my L Company. Yeah, I liked him very much.
What was he like as a person?
Very friendly, very nice. Very nice, yeah.
What sort of skills did he have?
Well, all the ordinary skills, but he was also extremely good at the night patrolling, at scouting, things like that, as you would expect of an Indian.
Can you talk a little bit about what little scrapes he got into at Camp Hale?
He seemed to have something going against one of the other platoon sergeants, and mostly words. I forget how he got in trouble once, but I don't believe I was around when that happened. But I think he lost his stripes. He was transferred out of L Company to another company. But no, I can't remember what the reason was for that. But he got his stripes back again very quickly. He was too good a man not to.
Talk a little bit about your understanding of what the Germans' appraisal was of the 10th Mountain.
The Germans knew about us from the beginning of our training, of course, because we were very well publicized in the States. Lowell Thomas, a very famous announcer at that time, had visited Camp Hale, and he knew that we were undergoing some extremely rough training and that sort of thing. And they made several movies of the 10th, one or two movies of the 10th, so we were no secret. And the Germans followed our training the whole time it took place, I'm sure. When we got to Italy, we got up to Curciola, one of the first things that happened was the Germans shot some of these special artillery shells over top of the town that burst, and these propaganda leaflets came fluttering down. And they said, "Welcome to the front, 10th Mountain Division. You won't find things as nice here as you did back at Camp Hale." They called us the Quiz Kids, too, because we were known for the very high intellect, the high average IQ, which I think was around 135 pounds, 135 or something like that. But at the same time that they welcomed us to the front, they warned their own troops to be especially alert. The 10th Mountain Division has arrived, and they are crack troops. They referred to us as elite mountain troops. At the end of our first big campaign against Riva Ridge and Mount Belvedere and Gorgalisco and Delatracia, we knocked all the German troops off those high key peaks. And we received kudos from all the big generals in the 5th Army and British 8th Army. But the one we liked the most was the one that came from General Albert Kesselring, who was the supreme commander of all the German troops in Italy. He referred to us as a remarkable division.
Did you feel intimidated by the Germans?
No, never. They were from the mountains, no doubt about that, and they could probably ski better than we could. But we had the advantage of our intellectual backgrounds. We were a very highly trained, very highly intelligent group. I don't think there ever has been, or never was in the past, an infantry division that had our IQ, so to speak.